President Daniel Carter made the 30-light-year journey to the Galactic Council headquarters himself. He wanted them to see a human face when he demanded justice. His ship took 3 weeks to reach the massive station that orbited the Council's neutral world. During that time, he watched the new Terra recordings every single day. He wanted the anger fresh. He wanted to remember every face of every person who died. His staff begged him to stop watching, but he refused. These were his people, and he would not forget them. The council chamber was enormous and filled with representatives from 19 different species. Some looked almost human. Others were so alien that Daniel's mind struggled to understand what he was seeing. Speaker Velthar floated at the center of the chamber in a crystalline body that reflected light in strange patterns. The speaker had mediated disputes for 300 years and was considered the wisest being in known space. Daniel stood before them all and presented his evidence. He showed them the recordings. He played the testimonies from the few neighboring colonies who had witnessed the Krell fleet movements. He read the names of all 15,000 dead. His voice never wavered. His hands never shook. He demanded that the Krell Dominion be held accountable for unprovoked genocide. The council listened in silence. Some of the alien representatives looked uncomfortable. Others showed no reaction at all. When Daniel finished his presentation, Speaker Velthar's voice echoed through the chamber like wind chimes in a storm. The speaker said the massacre at New Terra was indeed regrettable. However, the Krell claims to that territory had historical precedent dating back 6,000 years. Human expansion into the outer territories had been aggressive and had ignored several warnings. Perhaps both sides bore some responsibility for this unfortunate incident. The council recommended forming a joint commission to study the matter over the next 5 years. In the meantime, both sides should exercise restraint and avoid further conflict. Daniel stood there and felt something break inside him. Not his composure. That remained perfect. What broke was his faith that the galaxy operated on justice and law. He thanked the council for their time with a voice that could have frozen stars. He said Earth would consider their recommendation carefully. Then he turned and walked out of that chamber with his back straight and his head high. His staff followed in shocked silence. No one had ever walked out of a council session before it was formally dismissed. Daniel did not care. He was done pretending these beings cared about human lives. The journey back to Earth took another 3 weeks. Daniel spent most of it in his quarters staring at the stars. His chief of staff, Andrew Burke, finally came to check on him. Andrew had worked with Daniel for 10 years and had never seen him like this. The president looked older somehow, harder. Andrew asked if he was all right, and Daniel laughed. It was not a happy sound. He said the council's decision meant exactly what they both knew it would mean. The galaxy did not care about dead humans. The Krell had military strength and economic power. Earth had neither. In the cold mathematics of galactic politics, 15,000 human lives equaled nothing at all. Admiral Kate Bishop had not been idle while the president was gone. She had quietly recalled every deep space exploration vessel. She had consolidated the fleet into defensive positions around Earth and the inner colonies. She had activated reserve forces and begun emergency production of weapons and ammunition. When Daniel's ship docked at Earth Station 1, she was waiting for him with a grim expression. She already knew what the council had decided. Her intelligence network had intercepted the official decision before Daniel's ship had even left council space. She had used that time to prepare. The emergency meeting of Earth's government took place in a bunker 3 kilometers beneath Geneva. Every military leader and civilian minister attended. Daniel presented the council's decision without emotion. The room exploded into arguments. Some demanded immediate retaliation against the Krell. Others insisted that would be suicide. Earth's fleet numbered 80 warships. The Krell commanded 300. Every major council species could field fleets that would crush humanity's entire military in days. A few voices called for acceptance. Perhaps humanity should withdraw from the outer territories and focus on consolidating what they had. Perhaps survival meant knowing when to back down. Admiral Bishop waited until the shouting died down before she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire room. She said everyone was correct about Earth's military position. Humanity would lose a conventional war against the Krell. They would lose against any major council species. Earth's technology lagged centuries behind civilizations that had been traveling the stars since humans were still living in caves. In a straight fight with clear battle lines and honorable rules of engagement, Earth would be destroyed. She paused and let that sink in. Then she said Earth had never fought fair when facing extinction. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. They had survived by being adaptable and ruthless and willing to do whatever it took. The galaxy thought humans were civilized. The galaxy was about to learn that civilization was a choice humanity made, and choices could be unmade. Colonel Henry Drake stepped forward when Admiral Bishop finished speaking. He commanded Earth's Special Operations Division and looked like he had been carved from stone. He said conventional warfare was for species that could afford to lose conventionally. Humanity could not. But humans had thousands of years of experience fighting enemies who were bigger and stronger and better armed. Every war in Earth's history taught the same lesson. When you cannot win by the rules, you change the rules. You make the enemy afraid. You make them understand that fighting you costs more than it is worth. You hurt them in ways they never expected until they decide peace is better than war. Lisa Monroe was the civilian defense minister, and she argued against Drake's proposal. She said abandoning civilized norms of warfare would make Earth a pariah. The Council already barely tolerated humanity. If Earth started acting like barbarians, they would lose all support. Drake's response was immediate and harsh. He said the Council had already abandoned them. Those civilized norms only worked when everyone followed them. The Krell had murdered 15,000 civilians, and the Council's response was to form a committee. Earth could either accept that it had no protection, or it could become something the galaxy feared. Fear worked when justice did not. The debate continued for hours. President Carter listened to all of it without speaking. Finally, he raised his hand and the room went silent. He said Earth would try one more diplomatic approach. They would present new evidence. They would make more appeals. They would give the Council every chance to do the right thing. But while diplomacy played out, humanity would prepare for its failure. He authorized what Admiral Bishop had named the Hellhound Protocol. Officially, Earth remained committed to peace and Council law. Unofficially, humanity would begin operations designed to make the Krell regret ever hearing the name New Terra. The orders went out that night through encrypted channels. Special operations teams received new assignments. Intelligence officers began gathering data on Krell military positions and supply lines. Engineers started designing weapons that violated every Council treaty on warfare. Scientists who had been working on peaceful projects were reassigned to military research. Earth's industrial capacity shifted toward war production. And through it all, the diplomatic corps continued sending polite messages to the Council requesting justice and peace. Admiral Bishop stood in the Fleet Command Center and watched the preparations unfold. A junior officer asked her if she really thought they could win against the Krell. She said winning was not the goal. The goal was making the Krell wish they had never started this. She said humans had a saying from old Earth wars. You might kill us, but we will make you pay for every inch. The Krell thought they could slaughter humans without consequence. They thought the Council would protect them. They thought wrong. Humanity was about to teach the galaxy what happened when you tried to exterminate a species that had clawed its way up from Stone Age hunters to star travelers. The lesson would be written in Krell blood and Krell fear, and when it was done, every species in Council space would understand that humans were no longer asking for acceptance. They were demanding respect or promising vengeance. The choice belonged to the galaxy now. The Krell Dominion controlled 40 star systems, and their military had won wars against 6 different species over 2 centuries. Their high command dismissed Earth's diplomatic protests as the pathetic crying of a primitive species that did not understand galactic realities. When human ambassadors continued to demand justice, the Krell leaders laughed. What would humans do? Their fleet was tiny. Their technology was outdated. Their only allies were the few species too weak to matter. Earth was alone and helpless, and the sooner humans accepted that, the better. Commander Paul Jenkins stood on the bridge of the ESS Reaper and studied the star charts of Krell space. His ship was a stealth frigate designed for reconnaissance and special operations. His crew numbered 65 people, and every single one of them had volunteered for this mission. Every single one had lost someone at New T. Era, Paul's sister, had been a teacher in the colony school. She had died trying to shield her students from Krell plasma fire. He kept her picture on his command console. He looked at it every day. His crew had similar stories and similar pictures. They were not soldiers anymore. They were ghosts seeking revenge. The mission parameters were simple in words, but complex in execution. Make the Krell understand that killing humans had consequences. Show them that Earth no longer played by Council rules. Do it in a way that hurt them, but did not give them an excuse for total war. Paul had spent 3 months planning this operation with Admiral Bishop's covert operations team. They had studied Krell patrol patterns and supply routes and defensive positions. They had stolen navigation data from a council database using methods that would have horrified the diplomats still trying to negotiate peace. Now they were ready. The Krell mining colony on Tessar 4 housed 8,000 workers extracting minerals used in advanced ship construction. It was far from the Krell core systems and lightly defended because no one had ever attacked Krell territory before. The colony sat on the surface with massive excavation equipment digging into the planet's crust. An orbital elevator connected the surface to a processing station in orbit, where the raw materials were refined and shipped. Paul's tactical officer, Kelly Price, had identified 17 critical targets that would cripple the colony without killing anyone. That was important. If they massacred Krell civilians, they would be no better than the monsters who destroyed New Terra. The Reaper approached Tessar 4 using a captured Krell transponder that identified them as a supply vessel. Paul's communications officer answered the routine hails in perfect Krell language, learned from intercepted transmissions. The colony's traffic control cleared them to dock at the orbital station without suspicion. Krell security was designed to stop external threats. They had never considered that someone might already be inside their borders. That arrogance would cost them. Kelly coordinated the attack from her weapons station with the precision of a surgeon. The first strike took out the main power generator for the surface colony. The backup systems activated immediately, but they could only provide 30% of normal power. The second strike destroyed the orbital elevator's connection point. The massive cable fell away from the station and began tumbling toward the planet below. The third strike hit the excavation equipment and turned 50 million credits worth of machinery into useless scrap metal. The entire operation took 20 minutes. Paul watched his sensors and confirmed that no Krell life signs had been harmed. The colony was crippled, but everyone was alive. Before the Reaper jumped away, Paul transmitted a message on all Krell military frequencies. His face appeared on every screen in Krell space for exactly 30 seconds before their cybersecurity cut the transmission. He spoke in clear basic English and let their computers translate. He said humanity remembers New Terra. He said 15,000 civilians died begging for mercy that never came. He said the Krell started this by killing the defenseless. He said Earth had just shown restraint by sparing everyone at Tessar 4. He said next time humanity would not be kind. He said the choice was theirs. Then the transmission ended and the Reaper vanished into the black. The Krell response was everything Admiral Bishop had predicted. Their high command declared Earth a rogue state that had violated every principle of civilized warfare. They assembled a punitive fleet of 20 warships and sent them to Earth with orders to intimidate humanity into submission. The Krell admiral commanding the fleet transmitted ahead that Earth had 1 week to surrender those responsible for the Tessar 4 attack or face immediate consequences. President Carter responded through official channels that Earth did not negotiate with genocidal murderers. He said the Krell fleet was welcome to try their threats. He said they would regret it. Admiral Bishop watched the Krell fleet approach the solar system and smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. She had spent 3 months preparing for exactly this scenario. Her engineers had been busy while diplomats talked and Krell laughed. Now it was time to show these aliens why humans had survived on a planet that had tried very hard to kill them for millions of years. She gave the order and her operations officer activated the defensive grid. The Krell fleet detected the mines when it was already too late. Earth's engineers had spent 3 months seeding every logical approach vector to the solar system, with weapons that used no active sensors. The mines just floated cold and patient in the black, waiting for targets. They did not need to see the Krell ships. They could feel the gravitational disturbance of their faster-than-light drives. When the fleet dropped into normal space, the mines activated. The Krell point defense systems were excellent, but they were designed to stop missiles and torpedoes. These weapons were different. They were simple and brutal and effective. The mines did not destroy the Krell warships. That would have been wasteful. Instead, they used shaped charges to cripple engines and disable weapons and breach non-critical sections. Within 10 minutes, the entire Krell fleet was drifting helpless in space. Their crews were alive but trapped in damaged ships with life support running on emergency power. Help would come eventually. The nearest Krell base was 3 weeks away. Until then, they would sit in the dark and think about their situation. Admiral Bishop's face appeared on every screen in every Krell ship. She spoke in their language, which surprised them. She said they had come to Earth's home to teach humanity a lesson. She said, consider this lesson learned. She said they were alive because humans chose mercy. She said the Krell at New Terra chose slaughter. She said, remember the difference. She said Earth was tired of being civilized. She said the galaxy had made its choice when it let New Terra burn. She said humanity would now make its own choices. Then her image vanished and the Krell were left, floating in the black with plenty of time to reconsider their assumptions about primitive humans. Lieutenant Scott Hayes led a team of 6 cyber warfare specialists on a mission that would make the Krell paranoid for years. They infiltrated a Krell military communications hub by posing as maintenance contractors. Their fake credentials were perfect because they had been stolen from actual Krell security databases. Once inside, they uploaded a complete tactical analysis of Earth's defenses directly into the Krell military network. The analysis was beautifully detailed and completely false. It would take Krell intelligence months to realize that half the information was wrong. They would waste resources preparing for threats that did not exist. They would second-guess every decision. But Scott's team included one piece of true intelligence in the false data: a complete schematic of Earth's nuclear arsenal. Every warhead, every delivery system, every target designation. The Krell had banned nuclear weapons 300 years ago as barbaric. The Galactic Council had tried to make Earth do the same. Humanity had politely refused. Now the Krell military command stared at the numbers and felt something they had not felt in 2 centuries: fear. Earth had enough nuclear weapons to turn every Krell world into radioactive ash. Any invasion of Earth would be met with atomic fire that would make New Terra look like a training exercise. The Krell High Command held an emergency session to discuss the situation. Their military analyst presented calculations that were deeply disturbing. Earth's conventional fleet was weak, but their willingness to use unconventional weapons made them dangerous. Humans had somehow penetrated Krell space and Krell networks with ease. They had crippled a colony without firing a shot. They had trapped an entire battle fleet in a minefield that should not have existed, and they had made it clear that rules of warfare meant nothing to them anymore. One Krell admiral asked the question that everyone was thinking: how do you fight an enemy that has already decided civilization is optional? Paul Jenkins and his crew returned to Earth as heroes, though their mission officially never happened. Admiral Bishop met them personally at the dock and shook each person's hand. She told them they had done something important. They had shown the galaxy that humans were not victims waiting to be slaughtered. They were predators who had temporarily agreed to play nice. That agreement was now void. She said there would be more missions. She said Earth needed people willing to become monsters so that human civilians could stay safe. She asked if they were willing. Every member of Paul's crew volunteered again without hesitation. They had tasted revenge and found it satisfying. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session 6 weeks after the Tesser 4 incident. Speaker Velthar's crystalline form pulsed with agitated colors as the chamber filled with representatives demanding answers. The Krell delegation had submitted formal charges against Earth for violating 17 different council protocols on military engagement. They presented evidence of the unprovoked attack on their mining colony and the ambush of their fleet in Earth space. They demanded immediate sanctions and the arrest of all humans involved in what they called acts of terrorism. The chamber buzzed with discussion as various species debated the proper response. President Daniel Carter entered the council chamber without requesting permission to speak. He simply walked to the center floor and activated the holographic display system. Speaker Velthar began to object, but Carter overrode the speaker's authority by invoking an ancient council rule that had not been used in 400 years. The right of the slaughtered allowed victims of genocide to address the council without limitation or interruption. No one had expected a human to even know that rule existed, much less use it. The chamber went silent as Carter began his presentation. He projected the images of New Terra on every screen in the chamber. Not the sanitized summaries that had been shown before, but the actual recordings the Krell had left behind. Council delegates who had never witnessed human death in detail now saw exactly what had happened. Carter narrated each scene with a voice that never wavered. He named every victim. He described their lives. He explained what they had been doing when the Krell killed them. A child playing with toys, a doctor treating patients, a farmer tending crops. 15,000 stories of ordinary people doing ordinary things before they were murdered for the crime of being human. The presentation lasted 6 hours. Speaker Velthar tried 3 times to stop it, but the right of the slaughtered was absolute. Council law required them to watch and listen. Some delegates left the chamber and did not return. Others sat in visible distress as the images continued. The Krell delegation demanded the presentation end, but Carter ignored them. He wanted every species in this chamber to understand exactly what their civilized laws had permitted. He wanted them to see the price of their committee meetings and bureaucratic delays. When the final image faded, Carter stood in silence for a full minute before he spoke again. He said humanity had come to the council seeking justice. He said they had followed every protocol and respected every procedure. He said they had trusted that civilized species would protect the innocent from monsters. He said that trust had been betrayed. The council had offered committees and studies and recommendations, while Krell soldiers documented their murders with pride. Carter's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He said Earth no longer accepted a system where justice was reserved for powerful species and denied to weak ones. The Krell chief delegate stood and began to argue that his people had historical claims to the disputed territory. Carter cut him off with a gesture. He said the council could debate territorial rights or ancient claims or whatever diplomatic fiction they preferred. Meanwhile, Earth would operate under a new assumption. The rules of civilized warfare only applied when all sides followed them. The Krell had chosen to ignore those rules. Humanity would do the same. He said the Tesser 4 attack was not terrorism. It was mercy. No Krell died that day. Compare that to New Terra, where no human was spared. He said if the council wanted to sanction Earth for showing more restraint than the Krell had shown, then go ahead. Earth would survive alone. Speaker Velthar finally managed to speak, and the voice carried centuries of diplomatic authority. The speaker said Earth's actions threatened the entire foundation of council law. If every species responded to violence with violence, the galaxy would collapse into chaos. There had to be rules. There had to be consequences for breaking those rules. Carter laughed, and it echoed through the chamber. He said, "Tell that to the 15,000 corpses on New Terra." He said the rules had already failed. The consequences had already been ignored. Earth was simply acknowledging reality. He thanked the council for their time and walked out while delegates shouted questions and protests. Behind him, Vice Admiral Nicole Grant received her mission orders while President Carter was still addressing the council. Her task force consisted of 4 stealth frigates crewed by people who had volunteered for what the briefing called a high-risk operation deep in enemy territory. Nicole had earned her rank through 3 decades of service and had never seen orders like these. She was to infiltrate Krell core territory and neutralize a military research facility that intelligence suggested was developing biological weapons. The facility was heavily defended and located on a moon orbiting the Krell homeworld. Getting in would be nearly impossible. Getting out would be a miracle. She accepted the mission without hesitation. The journey took 7 weeks using captured Krell navigation data and forged council diplomatic codes. Nicole's ships pretended to be a council inspection team, traveling to review Krell military compliance with weapons treaties. The Krell granted them passage because refusing would admit they had something to hide. Nicole's intelligence officer had predicted that response perfectly. Krell arrogance was more reliable than their security. They could not imagine anyone would be bold enough to attack them in their own home system. The research facility orbited a barren moon that sensors showed was covered in automated defense platforms. The facility itself was built into the moon's surface with only docking ports and sensor arrays visible from orbit. Earth's intelligence on the facility came from a Krell scientist who had defected 2 years ago. He had described a program to develop a pathogen specifically designed to target oxygen-breathing species like humans. The weapon would be invisible and unstoppable. It would turn Earth's atmosphere into poison within weeks of release. The project was nearly complete. Captain Victor Hughes commanded the Marine assault team that would enter the facility. His people had trained for 3 months on a mock-up built from the defectors' information. They knew every corridor and every security checkpoint. They knew where the Krell kept their research data and where they stored the biological samples. Victor had personally selected each Marine for their ability to follow orders without question. This mission required precision and discipline. One mistake would kill them all. The assault began at midnight station time when most of the facility was on minimal crew. Nicole's ships approached using the inspection team credentials, and requested permission to dock for a surprise compliance review. The Krell facility commander protested but ultimately agreed, because refusing a council inspection would raise questions. The docking clamps locked in place and Victor's Marines moved through the airlock in their armor. The Krell security team was waiting to escort them, but Victor's people moved faster. Within 30 seconds, every Krell in the docking bay was unconscious from sedative darts. The Marines sealed the bay and began moving deeper into the facility. They encountered resistance at the third security checkpoint where Krell soldiers opened fire with plasma weapons. Victor's team used flash grenades and smoke to close the distance. They did not return fire with lethal force. Instead, they used electrical weapons to disable the Krell without killing them. Every enemy soldier was tagged with a sedative dose and left sleeping in the corridors. The mission was to stop the biological weapon program, not to massacre scientists and guards. Victor's orders were clear on that point. Earth would not become the monsters it was fighting. The research laboratory was exactly where the defector said it would be. Victor's technical specialist began downloading every file and erasing every backup. The biological samples were secured in containment units designed to survive a ship explosion. Everything the Krell had developed would be taken to Earth for analysis and countermeasures. The entire operation took 11 minutes from docking to completion. They encountered 47 Krell personnel. None were killed. All were sedated and secured. Victor's team withdrew to their ships carrying the evidence of Krell war crimes. Nicole gave the order to undock as alarms finally began screaming throughout the facility. Her ships accelerated away from the moon at full thrust while Krell defense platforms powered up weapons. She had planned the escape route carefully. The platforms had overlapping fields of fire that should have made escape impossible. But Nicole had studied those fields for weeks and found a gap. It required flying through a debris field at speeds that would shred most ships.
Her pilots were the best Earth had.
They made it through with minimal damage. The message Nicole transmitted to Krell High Command was simple and direct. She said Earth knew what they had been building. She said Earth had stopped them. She said all the Krell at the facility were alive and unharmed. She said if any biological weapon was ever used against humanity, the response would be instant and total. She said Earth now had samples of their research. She said Earth had scientists too. She said if the Krell wanted to fight a plague war, then humanity would fight back with everything they had learned surviving diseases that killed millions on their home world. She said choose peace or learn why humans evolved to survive viruses that would kill most galactic species. The Krell High Command faced a situation they had never encountered before. Their most secure facility had been penetrated by a species they considered primitive. Their bioweapon program was exposed. They could not admit to the program without facing council sanctions. They could not retaliate without revealing that humans had walked through their defenses like ghosts. Commander Jarek of Krell Military Intelligence submitted a report that terrified his superiors. Humans did not fight like council species. They did not seek territory or resources or glory. They fought like wounded predators who would die before showing weakness. The New Terra massacre had created something the galaxy had not seen in centuries. A species with nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. 6 months after New Terra burned, the Krell Dominion sent a private communication to Earth requesting formal negotiations. They did not go through the Galactic Council. They did not issue demands or threats. They simply asked to talk. In galactic diplomacy, this was as close to surrender as any proud species could manage without actually saying the words. President Daniel Carter read the message 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. The Krell who had laughed at human protests and ignored human grief now wanted to negotiate. He forwarded the message to Admiral Kate Bishop with a single question. "Do we trust this?" Admiral Bishop's response was immediate. She said trust had nothing to do with it. The Krell had learned that fighting humans cost more than they expected. They had lost face when their security was penetrated. They had lost confidence when their fleet was trapped like amateurs. They had lost sleep knowing humans had samples of their bioweapon research. Fear was more reliable than trust. The Krell were afraid, and that made them ready to talk. She recommended accepting the negotiation, but sending a military delegation instead of diplomats. This was a conversation between warriors, not politicians. The meeting took place on a neutral station, operated by an independent species that had no ties to either side. Admiral Bishop led the human delegation and deliberately excluded civilian representatives. She brought Colonel Henry Drake and Captain Victor Hughes and 3 other officers who had all participated in operations against the Krell. The message was clear. Earth sent the people who had hurt them. The Krell sent their military command, including the admirals who had ordered the New Terra massacre. Both sides understood this was not about apologies or reparations. This was about establishing terms for peace between enemies. The Krell offered territorial concessions first. They would recognize human claims to the outer territories, including the ruins of New Terra. They offered economic agreements that would benefit both species. They offered technology sharing that would help Earth close the gap with more advanced civilizations. Admiral Bishop listened to all of it without expression. When they finished, she said no. The Krell delegation looked confused. One admiral asked what Earth wanted if not territory and wealth and knowledge. Bishop's answer was simple. She wanted acknowledgement. She said the Krell had to publicly state that the New Terra massacre was unprovoked genocide. They had to admit that 15,000 humans died for no reason except Krell arrogance. They had to acknowledge that Earth's response was justice, not aggression. They had to say these things officially where the entire galaxy could hear. The Krell admirals reacted as if she had demanded they cut off their own limbs. Public admission of wrongdoing was unthinkable. It would damage Krell prestige for generations. It would invite other species to question Krell's strength. They could not accept such humiliation. The negotiation deadlocked for 3 days. The Krell offered more territory and more resources. Admiral Bishop refused everything. She said Earth did not want Krell charity. Earth wanted the truth spoken aloud. She said humans had learned an important lesson about galactic civilization. Power mattered more than justice. Strength mattered more than morality. Earth would never be truly safe until other species feared humanity enough to think twice before attacking. That fear required the Krell to admit they had been wrong and Earth had been right. Without that admission, this war would continue until one side could no longer fight. On the 4th day, a junior Krell officer did something unprecedented. His name was Sektar, and he had been part of the New Terra operation. He removed his rank insignia and asked permission to speak without authority. The Krell Senior Command tried to stop him, but the neutral mediators allowed it. Sektar stood before the human delegation and described what the Krell troops had been told before the attack. They were told humans were weak primitives who did not deserve territory. They were told the Council would not care about human deaths. They were told this was standard procedure for dealing with inferior species who overreached. Sektar said he had not questioned those orders at the time. He had been a good soldier following commands. He had participated in the massacre believing it was right and necessary. Then he watched what happened after. He watched humans penetrate Krell security like ghosts. He watched a primitive species trap an entire Krell fleet. He watched his commanders panic when they realized humans were not weak or helpless or afraid. Now he could not stop questioning everything he had been taught. He said the New Terra massacre was wrong. He said his people had murdered innocents and called it military necessity. He said Earth's response had been proportional and restrained compared to what the Krell deserved. The chamber went silent after Sektar finished speaking. The senior Krell admirals looked ready to execute him for treason. But his words had broken something. The human delegation watched as the Krell command argued among themselves in their own language. Finally, the lead admiral made a decision that probably saved his species from a long, bloody conflict. He agreed to Earth's terms. The Krell Dominion would issue a public statement admitting the New Terra massacre was unjustified, genocide, and acknowledging that Earth's military response was legitimate defense of human interests. The announcement sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. Species that had dismissed humanity as barbaric savages reconsidered their positions. The Krell were one of the most powerful militaries in known space. If they backed down to human demands, then Earth was clearly more dangerous than anyone had realized. Other species began reviewing their own policies toward humanity. Border disputes that had been pressing suddenly became negotiable. Trade agreements that had been stalled for years were suddenly approved. Fear changed the diplomatic landscape faster than decades of human pleading had managed. President Carter addressed humanity in a speech broadcast across all human colonies and ships. He said the dead of New Terra would never be forgotten. Their names were carved in stone on that ruined world where they would remain for eternity. Justice of a sort had been achieved. The Krell had admitted their crime. But Carter warned against celebrating violence as a solution. Humanity had proven it could be as brutal as any species in the stars. Now Earth had to prove it could be better. The galaxy would be watching to see if humans were just another violent species or something more. The Galactic Council reluctantly invited Earth to join the Security Directorate with actual voting power instead of symbolic membership. Speaker Velthar delivered the invitation personally. The speaker admitted privately to President Carter that the Council's greatest failure had been assuming civilization meant weakness. Earth had taught them that peaceful species could still be dangerous when pushed too far. The lesson had cost 15,000 human lives. Velthar expressed regret that the price had been so high. Carter accepted the apology but said words meant little compared to actions. Earth would judge the Council by what they did, not what they said. Colonel Drake's Special Operations teams were officially disbanded. Everyone knew they simply went deeper into classified status. The Hellhound Protocol was declared complete and archived, but every military commander understood the protocols could be reactivated if needed. Earth had created a capability that did not fit civilized warfare. The capability would remain ready in case civilization failed again. Other species understood this too. Human diplomats now negotiated with an unspoken threat hanging over every discussion. Push too hard and the humans might stop being diplomatic. Commander Jack Morrison's memorial was built on the ruins of New Terra. 15,000 names carved in stone that would last millennia. Linda Hayes had survived by chance, having been off-world during the attack. She became Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. She carried a datapad with all 15,000 names to every meeting. When species complained about human aggression or human weapons or human unwillingness to compromise, she would read names aloud until they stopped complaining. The dead spoke through her, and their voices carried weight that living diplomats never could. The galaxy learned to see humanity differently over the following years. Not as naive newcomers seeking approval, but as survivors of a brutal world who had earned their place among the stars through blood and determination. They could be civilized when others were civilized. They could be diplomatic when diplomacy worked. But every species now understood what happened when you mistook human patience for human weakness. The mask of civilization would drop and something ancient would emerge. Something that had survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. Something that would burn the galaxy before it let humanity be destroyed. The Krell rebuilt their relationship with Earth slowly and carefully. Sektar became a liaison officer between the two species. His testimony had changed Krell military doctrine. They now taught their officers that perceived weakness was not the same as actual weakness. They studied Earth's history and learned about human wars. They came to understand that humans had been fighting and surviving long before reaching the stars. That experience made them dangerous in ways technological superiority could not match. Admiral Bishop retired 2 years after New Terra. Her final speech to the fleet became required reading at every human military academy. She said humanity had tried to be what the galaxy wanted, peaceful and cooperative and civilized. The galaxy responded by slaughtering human children. So Earth reminded the stars of a truth that civilized species preferred to forget. Violence was not the opposite of civilization. It was the foundation. Every peaceful society existed because warriors stood ready to become monsters when needed. Earth had created those monsters. The galaxy should pray they never needed to be unleashed again. Human ships traveled Council space freely now. Pirates avoided human vessels. Aggressive species reconsidered expansion near human territory. The New Terra massacre had intended to teach humanity its place in the galactic order. Instead, it taught the galaxy that humans had no permanent place. They adapted. They survived. They did whatever was necessary. Earth remained civilized and committed to peace. But every species understood the warning. Humans would follow the rules right up until you made them stop. And when humans stopped being civilized, they became the thing nightmares were made of. They became themselves.